Tales of Kandris.
Darting shadows passed over the snowy whiteness. Onres looked up to see a pair of Graygyres flying overhead. Few creatures could easily escape these winged predators. Strong wings helped a sleek, greyish-white feathered body slice quickly through the air. Superlative vision allowed them to spot prey from even the most dizzying heights. Razor-sharp talons and a deadly beak made quick work of anything they brought to ground. Judging by the screeching, the pair must have had a successful hunt. Bumper started issuing a series of excited grunts around half to first. Onres looked around quickly to find the source of the buck's attention. Off to his left, some distance away, was a herd of savinilk does and fawns. They were grazing on the tough shrubbery and sparse clumps of grass. It would be time for the young buck to mate soon. Probably within the next few 8 shades. Onres wasn't looking too forward to that. Ungelded bucks could be troublesome during estrus. He didn't relish the idea of trying to travel with Bumper when that happened. Hopefully they can avoid any more herds and have this business finished before too long. They were making good time and the skies remained clear. It was around 1/4 that the pair encountered Attuil's watch on patrol. The men wore the settlement's standard blue and grey cloaks over their armour. Savvy stags and bucks carried their riders calmly, their hooves clicking in trained precision. They barely acknowledged Bumper's presence as they passed by. Onres nodded to the sharp-eyed watch captain as he rode past. The man was about the same age, with close-cut brown hair and eyes trained to spot trouble any and everywhere. Onres was confident that his description was already recorded in his mind, down to the length of his beard. The walls of Attuil came into view as the orange of second shading began to colour the sky. The gates were getting ready to close when he approached. He and Bumper slowed to a halt as a brawny watchman stepped forward, his hand outward.
"Greetings, friend,"
he said with a surprisingly amiable tone.
"What brings you to Attuil?"
"Just some lodging for me and my savvy,"
Onres replied, smiling.
"We'll resupply and be on our way before 1:45.
The man's quills scratched quick across the piece of pressed bark in his hand. He looked up briefly.
"Name?"
Onres Athenon.
"Welcome then, Onres.
The watchman's smile widened.
Hopefully we won't meet again on unpleasant terms."
His slate blue eyes hardened slightly as he said that, certain Onres got his point. The reclaimer nodded his agreement as the man stepped aside. After getting a glowing recommendation for a nearby inn, he led Bumper into the settlement. The massive stone gates closed behind him as second shading descended. Attuil was much larger than Nemdis, being as it safeguarded the main trade way between the domains of Rumbarada and the Ashen Twins. Traders and merchants helped to build it from a simple rest-stop village into a hub for much of the northern part of the continent. Walking down the major road, Onres saw a mixture of shops offering local goods and those specializing in foreign wares. There were people from various walks of life, hunters and trappers, crafters and artisans, all hustling about. A simple youth from the smaller villages would be overwhelmed. Following the directions he was given earlier, he arrived at his destination. The Scarlet Scandal was one of the larger inns found in the settlement. What set it apart were walls built from blood maple wood. Its bright red coloring made it the most noticeable thing along the road, which helped bring in curious customers. Onres first stabled Bumper around the back of the building. He removed the packs from his flanks and gave the stable boy $1.50 grand to give the savvy good provender and care. He entered the inn through a side door and met the clerk.
"Welcome, friend,"
An energetic voice greeted.
"Thank you for choosing the Scarlet Scandal."
The clerk was the usual obsequious type found in many such establishments. Balding grey hair covered his head, while a pointed nose held up a pair of wire-rimmed opticleers. A ready smile flashed across his thin lips. His wiry frame was dressed in vest and pants, a more muted shade of red than the building. He was standing behind a large, finely crafted darkwood desk.
Would you be interested in our menu or just a room?
Just a room for me, for now.
Onres wanted sleep more than food. The clerk nodded enthusiastically while taking the reclaimer's payment for a room and Bumper's needs. He gave him a small key.
You'll be on the 3rd floor, 2nd room on your left.
The clerk's smile looked even wider.
Would you be needing anything else?
No, thank you.
Onres wearily walked past the desk to a set of stairs.
Rest well, then.
The clerk gave a little wave as he passed by. Before Ayandi had sailed halfway to the sun, Onres and Bumper left Attuil's northern gates. Having gotten a good breakfast and a decent amount of sleep, Onres knew for certain they'd cover a lot of ground before 3/4 to second. Judging from the sky, there would be a little to no threats of snow, at least until he was ready to camp for rest. The duo walked easily over snow already packed down a bit earlier. By the looks of it, they were not far behind a large patrol. While he was eating breakfast in the Scandal's dining room, Onres overheard concern of a possible Torbruin sighting. Towering well over the height of a man, this massive ursine nightmare was trouble for even well-prepared hunters. Not only did it possess a coat of thick, brownish fur, but also had parts of its body covered in rocky protrusions. Some have said the creature may have a crude mastery over rock and stone. Usually making lairs within the foothills near the White Spines, the locals were alarmed by the presence of one nearby. It was suspected that the beast followed the savinilk herds south. Onres knew he had to be cautious. After a short while, Bumper started pulling back and shaking his head. His ears stood straight up. Onres kept his voice calm and soothing, reassuring the buck everything was fine. It took a bit of coaxing to bring Bumper back under control. It wasn't long before he found out what alarmed his savvy companion. A large group of riders crested a hill not far from them. As they got closer, Onres saw they were wearing the cloaks of Attuil. It mostly likely was the patrol they were trailing behind. Several of the riders were badly injured, blood staining the fur and metal of their armor. One, separated from the group, approached the duo. It was the same watch captain Onres met before. His sharp gaze seemed a bit more subdued since last he'd seen him.
I had a feeling I'd see you again.
Even his voice had an edge to it. Onres looked at the weary troop passing him by. There were makeshift litters with men carrying grievous wounds or dead. It was dragged by Savi's missing riders, their heads low, and as they were led along.
Torbruin.
The watch captain answered the unspoken question on the reclaimer's face.
We met him on a side path near the road. Put up a hell of a fight, but we managed to bring him down.
At great cost.
Onres said sympathetically, meeting his gaze.
Lost some good men.
The other man stated, face grim.
I'll have many homes to visit before Chalithró finishes its descent.
The procession continued on as they both watched in silence. Onres wasn't very religious, but seeing this caused him to remember an old prayer his grandfather taught him when he was younger.
May the final leg of your journey lead you to rest in peace.
The watch captain gave him a clap on the shoulder, bringing him back to the present.
Be careful while traveling.
It'll take us some time to clear that carcass away.
He clicked to his Savi and rejoined his patrol's return. Onres watched them for a bit longer, then led Bumper back to their own path. It wasn't long until he spotted several plumes of smoke rising into the air. Thick with a greenish color, they were off to the right and a fairly bit of distance ahead. A bitingly acrid scent of fire and wardweed soon assaulted his nose. The patrol burned the brightly colored flowers of the plant to discourage carrion eaters. It would take some time before the butchers and skinners came to claim the Torbruin's remains. Kandris wasn't a planet that gave many things freely, and everything that was gotten was never wasted. Onres steadied Bumper as they continued on, putting the scene behind them. The endless mute tones of the frigid shrublands soon gave way to sprawling hills. The going was a bit tougher as the incline became a hindrance. Onres's breathing was measured, and even through the extra exertion. Walking like this was good for him. He felt that riding savis, while needed for speed, ultimately deprived a person of necessary exercise. It was doubtful that many would be able to keep up the pace he set. By 2:15, he and Bumper made camp behind a hill not far from the road. The dream came back to him again. He was running with Gwenfer through a snowy field, clumps of blue blooms sprouting through the frost. Somehow she had gotten ahead of him, laughing happily. The daylight sparkled in her raven hair as she ran.
You've got to be faster than that.
She playfully teased him. She paused just long enough for him to get close, then dashed away before he could grab her.
Oh, I'll do better, all right?
Onres replied. While Gwenfer was fast, she was never able to outrun him for long. But this was strange. No matter how fast he ran, no matter the effort, he could never get any closer. She always stayed far out of arm's reach. Suddenly, he found himself running against forceful winds. A blizzard had come. His pace slowed while he struggled to move through the piles of snow.
Onres.
Through the howling gale, he heard her
Onres.
voice calling to him, her laughter taking on a more sinister edge to it. Soon his legs were all but frozen in place. His head turned around trying to spot her, but all he could do was hear mocking laughter. Then it came into view. A gigantic figure, obscured by the blizzard's whipping winds and the blinding snow, stared at him. Eyes that seemed to peer from far above him burned with an intense, icy white light. Gwenfer's voice wasn't laughing anymore. The tone of fear, even desperation, had replaced the evil mirth. The giant reached out towards him, slowly. Onres tried to run, to move, but his limbs wouldn't obey him. Gwenfer's voice dropped several octaves as she shouted his name, just before the creature grabbed him.
No!
Onres was awake, his hands stretched out in front of him. His bedroll and blankets were in a tangled mess around his legs. His eyes recognized the muted light filtering through the walls of his tent. The hidden monster was gone, so was Gwenfer. He was alone. He noticed a large shadow approaching his tent from the left. He instantly lunged out the tent's front flap and into a roll. He came up on guard, the dark metal of his long knives at the ready. It was only Bumper standing there, his large head tilted to the side, lead still tethered to a nearby stake. He must have walked over to the tent, probably concerned when he heard the man scream. The strange combination of his embarrassment and the savvy's concerned look was so comical, he started laughing. His blades fell from his hands, and he fell down in laughter. Tears were streaming down his face by the time an antlered shadow was over him. Onres looked up to see Bumper staring down at him in bewilderment. He rose from the frosty earth and hugged the savinilk's massive neck.
It's all right, boy,
he reassured, moving back to look the animal in the eye.
I'm fine. It was just a dream, a very bad one is all.
Bumper touched his snout to the man's face, as if to tell him he was glad everything was fine. The sky above was bright. Ayandi hadn't begun its march westward yet. Onres replaced his blades back in their sheaths and prepared to get on with their way. It was early, but that dream made him anxious, and he wanted to be farther along. First, Shading's deep amber tones painted the sky. Onres and Bumper had put a good deal of time and distance between them and the dream he had earlier. Thinking back on the parts he could remember, it seemed to have changed somewhat. The addition of Gwenfer's laughter changing and the shadowy giant weren't things he experienced before. Was it due to the fact he was getting closer to finding her? Did something else happen? Bumper's loud bellow shook him back to reality. The buck stopped several paces away from where another path intersected the main road. The man almost scolded him until he caught the sight of something approaching from the right, along the path. A light fog cleared as he tried to see what was coming. A figure wrapped in rags and bits of rusted armor came into view. There was no cloak or coat to cover the body. What could be seen underneath the tattered clothing were patches of dry, greyish skin over stark white bone. It walked with a halting gait, like its long, atrophied leg muscles were being forced into movement. There was a smell, a miasma of ash and ruin that wafted from it. Onres automatically took a few steps backwards. A hand flew behind him, reaching for his sheaths. One word escaped from his mouth, unintentionally.
Ashen-Cold.
As if hearing his outburst, the undead creature paused, its head slowly turning in his direction. Eyes, forlorn and distant, stared at him from within the folds of a ragged hood. They burned with undead light that seemed to convey deep sorrow. Onres maintained his distance, eyeing the creature cautiously. He had heard that making contact with the doomed inhabitants of Pruinaz could infect one with the same terrible curse. Whether it was true or not, he dared not test that rumor. Gathering his inner psychic force, he pointed a finger in the hooded thing's direction.
Be on your way, remnant of the past.
His voice boomed, feeling the energy adding power to his words.
I seek not to deter your path.
The hooded figure waved a hand covered in rags. It made a shooing motion like the man's words were an annoying insect. The figure turned away and silently continued further down the path. As it passed out of sight, Onres was puzzled. While he wasn't that proficient with the voice of lesser command skill, he felt confident he could direct an undead. It was almost as if the thing still had its mind and will. There might be something more to the curse than what was rumored. He shook his head and continued on his own way after waiting several more moments. Whatever it is, he wouldn't be the one to find out. A familiar ringing greeted Onres's ears as he walked. He looked up to see a sleigh pulled by a team of cloud-hop males far overhead. A fairly recent phenomenon within the past 12 longshades, the clodhopper courier delivered letters and packages on a regular basis all over Sunward. They were much faster than the usual wait of several 8 shades to receive post from a loved one. Onres waved up to the courier, fairly certain he didn't see him. He was surprised when he heard a handbell ringing happily in response. This brought a smile to the man's face. He always liked waving up at the courier as a boy. The idea of caribou climbing through the skies always fascinated him. Judging by the direction the team was heading, they'd be in White Peaks before first shading. A manic hustle and bustle greeted Onres when he finally entered the settlement of White Peaks. Located near the foothills of the White Spines Mountains, the settlement became a huge tourist attraction, due a recurring event the locals called Tumblesnow. It was a series of avalanches that occurred after the Ashen-Cold mating season. People came streaming in from the main gate, hoping to get a spot in a nearby field to watch. A festive excitement filled the hearts of everyone. There were shops offering everything from commemorative toys, maps to the best viewing spots, chairs for sitting and even sweet rolls in the shape of a balled-up Ashen-Cold. The settlement's whole economy was built around the timid little creatures. When the mating season was over, local trappers would catch as many as possible. Ashen-Cold shells are famous for their sturdiness. Local blacksmiths would sometimes overlay them in certain metals and further enhance their native properties. House Efgur, the rulers of this settlement, lived in an opulent estate not far from its center. Their ancestors converted a large hill into a sprawling collection of buildings, with a massive keep at the top. They taxed the people very lightly, following their ancestors' earthly Efgur sage advice.
The weed of greed can kill a bountiful garden.
Even though they followed this policy, they still were enormously wealthy, and the populace loved them as well. Despite it being his first time around this many people, Bumper kept his calm. He even poked his snout into a curious girl's outstretched palm. She laughed and waved as he and Onres walked past. Unable to fight their way through the surge of expectant humanity, the duo rode the wave down White Peak's main thoroughfare out through the northern gate. The rush came to rest in an open field full of sparse clumps of grass and flowers. It was in the perfect distance to the mountains, close, but not too close. A great scramble began, with everyone jostling to claim the best spot. Some set up tents, others whole booths or stalls. Many groups just laid down comfortable blankets and had a picnic. More opportunistic folks turned their carts into impromptu eateries, serving hot food or snacks. Children ran and played not far away. It was a perfect time to make merry. Onres guided Bumper to a spot off to the side from the main press. He knew that it would be next to impossible to find lodging with all these people. It would be another rest period under Kandris's skies. It would be more convenient that way, seeing as he needed to go further east. Ayandi's shadow was starting its approach to the sun. The world was slowly bathed in tones, amber and orange. When the sun was fully eclipsed, everyone held their breath. A low rumbling had begun to shake the ground. A great wave of snow and ice rolled thunderously down one of the larger mountain slopes. Occasionally, small dark shapes could be seen tumbling amongst the snow. Male avalanchadillos, having completed their part in the mating cycle, were leaving their burrows in the care of their mothers. Their sturdy shells protected them as they careened heedlessly through the air. Several similar avalanches took place among the other mountains, filling the world with a deafening roar. Everyone held their hands over their ears, laughing and enjoying the spectacle. Then, as suddenly as it started, it was over. People rose from their seats, cheering and clapping. Even Onres couldn't resist joining in. While the snow was settling, crowds started dispersing. Some were heading back to White Peaks, others in different directions, probably towards home and warmth. Onres took his tent down from Bumper's back and set up camp. Proximity to the large settlement would ensure they wouldn't have too much trouble resting. By the time second shading arrived, he was already secured in his bedding and fast asleep. It would be an early start.
If you enjoyed the content, please support this channel by liking, subscribing, and ringing the notification bell for more. Thank you.